Welcome to MKE Gadgets. Today we're going to talk about remote switching for a Shop Vac. What we're not going to talk about is electronic switching like I have on my chop saw. I turn the chop saw on and Shop Vac will fire. The nice thing about this setup is as soon as the Shop Vac senses a surge of electricity from the saw, it fires through this electronic box. But that's not what we're talking about today. This is my welding table, and I'm showing you a shot of the exhaust vent. This is just a remote control for like a Christmas tree lights, on off. And in the attic I have an exhaust fan. So I turn it on. And you can see the vent is sucking out my exhaust fumes. We are not going to talk about this kind of control to operate a Shop Vac, a dust collector, or an exhaust fan, though it can be used because I'm using it. In the corner of my shop, I have my two biggest chip producing machines, my lathe and my mill. I position them next to each other to keep the mess in one area, but I also have a Shop Vac in the corner between the two, with the hose that will reach both of them. And the problem has always been, when I'm drilling, I want to get the chips right away, and it doesn't matter if I'm going to lathe or the mill drilling. But then you have to reach back and grab the Shop Vac hose, and then you got to reach around the back and turn on the switch. Well, if it's too inconvenient, you're not going to do that, and you're not going to pick up the chips right away, and you have more of a mess to deal with later on. So I thought if I could make a remote switch that when I picked up the hose for the Shop Vac would automatically fire, I would be ahead of the game. So let's take a look at that. What we are going to talk about is this little box I made to control the Shop Vac in the corner. As soon as I pull out the hose, the Shop Vac goes on. I return the hose, the Shop Vac goes off. Inside of here I have a little switch I got at Granger. The rest of the parts I got at the local Menards. On the bottom are magnets, so I can put it on any steel surface on my mill or my lathe. The beauty of this is when you're drilling or milling, one hand can be drilling and the other hand can grab the Shop Vac and grab chips right away. So if you see my other video, number 23 on cafeteria trays, I really like using them on my lathe and mill just to collect the chips. It makes cleanup a little bit easier. But you always have some chips that make it into the T-slots or into the vise, into little nooks and crannies. So my first attempt at making a crevice tool was a piece of PVC. I heated it up and I squished it in a vise. And you can see, because of the wall thickness, it caught the chips. It went down into the T-slot real nice, but you get a couple of chips and it gets clogged up. So I had some aluminum. This is a piece of a crutch that I got off of the curb. I like to save aluminum or steel that I see on the curb. You never know what you're going to make out of it. I cut it down. I put it in a vise and squished it, but I didn't let it get too thin. And I had to put a slot in there for inside of the hose here. And again, one-handed use, it turns the vac off. It doesn't get much easier than that. Let's go to the bench and take it apart, and I'll show you how I made it. This project involves a little bit of electrical work. If you're not comfortable with it, you might want to hire an electrician. So I started out with 2 extension cords that were 9 feet long. I cut off the opposite ends and fed them into the watertight fittings here. Now this box is designed for outdoor use, and I figured with the oil and the chips I wanted to keep it clean inside, so that's why I went with that. I have 2 screws that screw the PVC onto the box. Once you remove the screws and the cover had a hole in there. And here's a micro switch. 15 amps, 120 volts, I got from Granger. What holds the switch is a piece of 1-inch square aluminum tubing. I cut a slot in. I drilled 2 holes to mount the switch. And I drilled 2 holes in the bottom that mounts the switch to the box. This piece was my first one and I made it a little bit too short, so I had to discard it. The white wires are wired to themselves, the green wires are grounded to the box, and the black wires run to the switch. You can hear it click. I had to bend the hook up so it would stick out of the cover, so when I pushed in the Shop Vac hose, it would just make a little bit of contact. Now this switch has 2 settings, normally open and normally closed. For this project, I wired it up normally closed. Most switches, when you press it, it turns the item on. This is the opposite. When you take the hose out, it turns it on. When you put it in, it turns it off. So that's how I wired up my Shop Vac with a remote control switch. Thank you for watching MKE Gadgets, and as always, please subscribe to my channel.